Flow Factory Podcast. I'm Corey, and I'm back with a special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, CBS very own Josh Pate. What's up, my guy?
I'm good. I'm finally here. We've been going back and forth, feels like for like 5 years.
Yeah.
So we're finally here. I don't want to tell people what time of day we're recording, but we're finally here.
Yeah, man. You on the road right now. You all the big-time coaches, you're pulling up. Like you said, we talked earlier in the year, and I got a lot of fans been in my DMs. They've been encouraging me for like the last 2 years. Like, hey, man, you got to get with Josh Pate. I'm a fan of your podcast. We spoke a little bit about that. I think you're very good at what you do, and it's a pleasure for you to be on the Flow Factory Podcast, man.
I appreciate you having me. So I've watched what you guys are doing with it. And then, I don't know how long ago it was you reached out, and I said, man, I'm in Miami all the time.
Right.
We'll do this no problem. But then you realize how tough it is to get schedules to overlap.
Yeah.
But this is a good time of year, man. It used to be, I don't know how you viewed May, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but when you're in the content creation space, and especially when you're covering college football, it used to be that folks looked at this like a school teacher would look at summer. This is just time off. This is, you don't do anything. And with the way that industry, the football industry has evolved, and then the way this industry has evolved, you can still work seasonal if you want to, but it's such a blessing to have May and June, like March, April, May, June, be structured the way it is, because this is when you can get out on the road.
Right.
This is when you can go see other folks that are your peers, but you can also go and talk to coaches and talk to staffs, and there's no substitute for the games themselves.
Right.
But this time of year, man, it's become so valuable to someone who wants to cover this sport year-round.
Yeah. I think what you do is dope as well, because the recruiting's always nonstop, right? While college, the football season may stop, but there's always been writers that, kept the offseason going with whatever's going on spring football-wise, recruiting. But you brought something different to the table as you started to blow up. I got, onto you around pandemic time.
Yep.
And I thought the storytelling, the communication, being able to connect with fans and not just regurgitating recruiting information was a breath of fresh air in the space. What inspired you to get into this space? What was your dreams getting into this?
Well, the entire format you just said, you can present that like, oh, that's so genius to do it that way. I never thought about it like that. I thought about it as, how else would you do it? Which bleeds into my background. Like I didn't come up the traditional journalistic way, and I didn't have family in the business or whatnot. I just grew up in the Deep South, and I grew up with a social circle of like 12 to 15 dudes I hung out with, like most folks watching this, and that's what we talked about. But we didn't stop talking about college football in January.
Right.
Like we didn't say, all right, there comes the confetti, national champ is crowned, we'll check in on National Signing Day, spring practice maybe, and then we'll be here in August. We talked about it all year. And I always thought to myself, it's crazy. The NFL gets covered like it does for a reason.
Right.
College football is the number 2 sport in this country in terms of popularity, yet all the networks that had the media rights deals, they like put it on a shelf.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I said, if I could ever, do it my way, if I could have a show of my own, I would never stop. Because I know there's a market for it. I was the market. So it was already market tested. You didn't have to trial and error. But it's so weird how if I were talking to you about this stuff in 1993, that would just be it. If you and I weren't at one of the 3 or 4 major networks, it would just be a pipe dream.
Yeah.
But since we happen to exist in an era where the entire digital media revolution happened, I'll never forget 10 years ago seeing my first Facebook live stream and YouTube live stream and realizing, wait a second, that's it. They may slam the door in my face at every network until the end of time, but if I can put it together, like if I can do it, if I want to bet on myself, I can actually do it.
Yeah.
You could actually scale something, and that's, it's like a 15-year journey, but if you really want to encapsulate it into one sentence, it's being able to bet on yourself in this space at the perfect time.
Right.
Because that's kind of what you can do now.
That amount of time, and we'll get into some Florida football talk. You're on a nice run of Mike Norvell. You have Billy Napier today, Mario Cristobal tomorrow. So we're going to talk some Florida football. But that time space that you just talked about, 15 years, a lot of people jump into this game and they're in and out a couple years, or they're not consistent for a long time. But it takes 15 years, man, to make an imprint and a mark on the industry and to get opportunities. You know, they're not fly by night. So what do you speak to the longevity and that type of sacrifice? Because you had to sacrifice. The money's not flowing in right away.
No, but I'm glad it's like that. I didn't think that at the time. I mean, I got, you know, I've gone through being without. I can promise you, I've gone through living without, and I've gone through being evicted and having a minus symbol next to my bank account. So I know all that. But at the time, it was terrible. In retrospect, I'm glad it works that way. I'm glad it's cooking rather than microwaving, because unbeknownst to you, and you can relate to this no matter what walk of life you're in professionally, you don't know how many people you're competing against. You don't know how many people are gunning for the same thing you're gunning for. And in our world, there are limitless opportunities, but there are very few spots at the top.
Right.
There are very few spots in any entertainment-based sector of being the top dog or even one of the top 4 or 5. And that's where the big money is. That's where the big audience is. But you don't know how many people are gunning for that. So I'm sitting there 2015, 16, 17, and I'm getting 38 views on a live video, and I'm thinking to myself, I must be doing something wrong, and you're not doing something wrong. It takes a while. Intentionally, the entire ecosystem is built to where you got to prove yourself over a sustained period of time, because if I'm running a platform like YouTube, or if I'm running, you know, Google at large, you may stumble into something that clicks once or twice.
Right.
But the folks who are putting it out consistently, that's who we're going to feature, that's who we're going to cause to scale, but also the byproduct of how, relatively speaking, hard it is it filters out the competition.
For sure.
Hardly anyone's left.
For sure.
Which is wild, because I go back to my upbringing. You and I are talking, it's really late at night right now.
Right.
And so we've both been up for a long time today.
Yeah.
But I've worked in construction before.
Right.
I've worked in heating and air installation before. I've worked in warehouses before.
Right.
And so I've worked 9 or 10 hour days in that setting. A 17-hour day doing this stuff is easy, relatively speaking, compared to that. Plus, we're talking about, we're not talking about putting in a duct of 16 inches versus 18 inches in this home that we can't even afford to live in. We're talking about college football.
Yeah. Something you passion and love, man. You know, that's not work.
And it's 2025, which means if you just want to cover one sport the entire year,
you can.
You can cover one sport the entire year and make a really good living doing it.
Yeah. It just takes time. It just takes time, man. So everybody out there, just keep grinding. You know, content ain't easy. It's a saturated market, but if you keep grinding, it'll all pay off. Let's get into some Florida football,
Let's do
man.
it.
I'm a Gator guy, so I got to start with the flagship. You just left Billy Napier. Just to check in on my fandom, where I'm at. Last year was tough, man. My expectations going into the year were chill. I like the talent acquisition from Billy Napier. I thought he did a good job leading up to last year with, you know, getting the team, flipping the locker room from Dan Mullen. It was a deficiency of talent, so he did a great job with that. I just wanted to see how we performed. That game 1 versus Miami was ugly, 41-17, and then we doubled down on ugliness with the Texas A&M game. So early on in the season, I just was a little over it. Of course, we got rolling, hit my season expectations of 8 wins. I had us at around 8, even though I was upset early in the year. We hit 8 wins. I still wanted a new coach. Florida decided to keep him. Lagway looked good going down the stretch. The defense got better, but they kept Billy Napier, so here we are. What's your overall opinion on the Florida Gators?
I can't believe he survived that. And I'm not saying that to say that I think he should have lost his job. I'm saying it doesn't matter what I think, because I'm not the decision maker today.
Right.
If you go back to halfway through the season last year, you remember the talk. You probably participated in the talk.
For sure.
It wasn't will he lose his job? It's who are we going to hire once he does lose his job?
Right.
And I remember some of the feedback I was getting from really like deep-pocketed, influential people around Florida, and the message was, Josh, it's going to happen. We're just trying to figure out, like, do we wait until the bye week?
Right.
Is there strategy behind when we? But it was a formality. So if you were to have shown me a crystal ball and I looked into it and you showed me May 2025, and I'm still sitting down with him, and not only am I sitting down with him, I think they could legitimately have one of the better teams in the conference this year. And all that, I would have said, I'm not going to say it's impossible because it's college football. Crazy stuff happens all the time, but I got to see how this plays out. I got to see how this is about to turn around. But the one thing I told him today when we recorded, I said, I almost viewed the way you guys played in the second half as having the audacity to still compete.
Right.
Because if you think about, if you had any inkling as to what the outside world was saying about you last year, if you're Florida, you're done.
Right.
You completely flatlined. But they didn't. And I know they had to have been hearing it, but symbolically, it looked like they were closed off to the world. And he talked about that a lot. He said, the thing that I kept realizing is our guys didn't quit. And that's not coach speak. That's literally the guys just kept showing up. The guys kept competing. And so you keep competing. Eventually, if you got enough talent in the room, you're not just going to lose forever. But I think what shocked them is they thought they had everything figured out. They thought they had things ready to go. You know, it's like driving a car off the lot, and it's brand new, and then you feel a wobble as soon as you get it out on 3rd Avenue. It's not supposed to be that way. And similarly, you open against Miami at home, at the very least, it's supposed to be down to the wire.
Right.
Even if they clip you, it's supposed to be 23-20.
Right.
And instead, it's just you look listless and lifeless. In that A&M game, you look listless and lifeless. And so what it was I agree with you, because they came out of the season probably hitting the win total that I thought they'd hit, that I would have told you they need to hit at the beginning of the year. And it was a perfect indication of this thing I've always believed in, and that is define your expectations in August, whatever they are. But then don't revisit them until December, because this sport's like this right here.
Yeah.
It's nobody's season. I mean, even Ohio State last year won the whole thing. They lost 2 games.
Yeah.
So even their season was like this. And you get so in the weeds, that fog of war from a fan's perspective of just not really knowing and not having your bearings about you. You're sitting there crucifying a guy, and he comes out in December and has the exact record you thought he'd have.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, I'm including myself on this, one of the hardest things to do is look yourself in the mirror in December. It's easy to castigate someone else.
Yeah.
But if I'm crucifying a guy for, as it turns out, having the exact record I thought he'd have, and I'm the one pissed off at him, do I look in the mirror and say, maybe you need to check yourself?
Yeah, overreacted a little bit. I think it was more in the moment for a lot of Gator fans, man. We hate Miami.
I was there. Yeah. I felt it.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So was I. It was ugly, man. So Miami fans running around the city, jumping on our statues. Yep. It was an ugly affair.
It was the worst team for it to happen.
And then Texas A&M was a new staff. Some of our guys went over there, and for them to come into the swamp and beat us like that was discouraging. But they figured it out. This year, luckily, we got some easy games in the beginning. I thought it took them a while to find the right guys last year. Early on, they were playing the wrong players at certain positions, especially in the secondary. Justice Boone, nothing against him, but he wasn't back to pre-injury Justice Boone. They had him playing a lot in the trenches. We found our guys toward the end of the season. Caleb Banks came on, the defensive line started going crazy. And you could just see the potential with DJ Lagway. Mertz going down was definitely tragic, but it gave the opportunity for DJ Lagway to come in and show a lot of promise.
Yeah.
So now, for me, this season is, we got to take care of business. I think Miami is a must-win. I think we could go on and make the playoffs, but just from an in-state recruiting perspective and just the rivalry, you got to start winning rivalry games. That's one of the things that Billy's struggling with. So I think early on in the season, to set the tone, that Miami game is going to be key. Yeah,
I always go to the pop aspect, the proof of performance aspect.
Right.
You sell guys and sell guys and sell guys in recruiting, but eventually you've got to have results that you can put in front of them. Because if you're asking me to come choose Florida over Miami or Georgia or whatnot, you're telling me I can beat those teams at Florida. So I've got to see you beat them. I've got to see you guys do that because not every kid is going to be enamored with the idea that, hey, we can't get it done yet, but you'll be what turns us around.
Right.
An alpha competitor is drawn to that.
Right.
If you got your affairs in order elsewhere. But not everybody's drawn to that. And that's okay because most kids aren't the alpha dog competitor. You're going to have an entire team made up of maybe 1, 2, 3 of those, and the rest of the roster is high-level athletes who want to go win somewhere. So that's the old catch-22 in that business. How do you convince guys before you've won?
Right.
But then once you get them there, do you win with them? Must win is always thrown around, but I get what you're saying there. At the very least, you got to have a product on the field this year, which is made up entirely of your guys, because you're fourth year there now.
Right.
So there is no Dan Mullen. There really wasn't last year, but they're especially not this year. So whatever product you're putting on the field, whatever the culture and identity of the program is, that's your thumb.
Yeah.
And that's your thumbprint on the field on Saturday.
What do you think about the offensive play calling? It's like I got a couple things here. So I think a player like DJ Lagway can't elevate Napier's play calling. He plays a little bit more touchdown to check down. Mertz was more of a check down and, deep. He's looking for the deep ball occasionally. So I do think DJ Lagway could be a guy like Jameis was for Jimbo Fisher. But I also feel like he should possibly delegate the offense. And I know a lot of the fans wanted an offensive coordinator, which we didn't get. There is some smoke about Russ Callaway calling the offense. Did you get any perspective, insight on that?
Yeah, but it always comes back to the same thing with Billy, and that is he believes him calling plays gives them the best chance to win. And so there are a lot of people who are listening right now who will disagree with that, but that's how he feels about that. Now, the big question is, you're talking about a different skill set, Graham Mertz to DJ Lagway, and you saw it kind of switch last year. I mean, one of the tells of a guy is, are you married to your system, or do you marry your system and build it around the skill set of the guy that you got pulling the trigger at any given point? So that's what I'd watch for him this year. And, there's this other thing. When we talk about players at the college level and how developmental college still is, and guys evolve and grow and they look different as a junior than they do as a freshman, I'm always interested to watch that on the coaching side, because it's assumed that since those are full-grown adults in their 40s and 50s, that whoever they are now, they just always will be. But they're humans. And a lot of them are high-achieving type humans and smart people. So high achievers who are really smart, who are in a competitive environment, one of the common traits is, in a perfect world, they're constantly adapting and constantly growing. And so that's a 50,000-foot statement, but if you zoom it in on Billy Napier, that's part of the beauty of this sport and part of the unknown, and why it's so hard to predict it is you never know at any given point, for all the players evolving or developing, you never know if that guy's looking himself in the mirror saying, you know what, this year, this, and this changes about me. Or I'm going to adjust 20, 25% on that, and that.
Now, in your post-spring, which got the Twitter timeline jumping a little bit, you had your post-spring top 20. Florida came in at 9. Do you think this is a playoff caliber roster and team?
Yeah, them and Oklahoma both I had pretty high up there, and that got a lot of pushback because, well, for obvious reasons, but I didn't take schedule into account at all with that. So I made it a static sort of, that's my feel, that's my gut. That's not a power rating or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people cannot help but marry their predictions to two things, last year and schedule. You're projecting what you think Florida will do against their schedule. Well, that's not how I rank teams. And I also don't think that in a sport where 30 to 50% of the roster turns over every winter, that last year is the first thing that I should be looking at. You don't just carry over. It's not you hit pause in February and you play in August. So I think they could be really good, but I also think it's what I would call like a high variance team.
Yeah.
Where you take like Georgia any given year, I feel like their high end is 12-0, their low end's 9-3. It's pretty compact.
Right.
There's not a ton of variance.
Right.
With Florida, they could be a 10-win team, they could be a 6-win team, and we're talking about a totally different discussion in December, A versus B.
Now, I'm with you on that. They won 8 games last year, but if you look at the games, they could have gotten to 10, like, very easily.
Yeah.
They're a few plays away from winning 10 games. Things you were talking about, just the roster turnover and flip like every December. I think that's one of the advantages of Florida. Football is the ultimate team sport. Not having 20 new guys come in your locker room. I think they had maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 guys coming through the portal. I don't know how many they're depending on outside of J. Michael Sturtevant. They're not counting on them guys to contribute a whole lot. So I think just from a chemistry standpoint, we're going to be at an advantage. Those guys lost to Miami last year. They're going to have a chip on their shoulder from that loss. They still got a lot to prove. I just think from a chemistry standpoint and the lack of turnover is going to be one of our advantages. But one of our disadvantages, and one thing that I'm watching, is we lost Will Harris. Will Harris came into that locker room and flipped the secondary a little bit. It took them a little while to get going, but once they got going, they started clicking, and they looked real good. The previous 3-4 years, we couldn't tackle. The communication was off. So I do want to see if the new defensive back, I do like Sunseri. I think Sunseri's great with recruiting from what I'm hearing, but I got to see it on the field. Same thing with Deron Wilson. No drop-off in recruiting. Those guys are hitting it on all cylinders, but I want to see what it looks like on Saturdays.
They really like the defensive additions they made. I can tell you that because that's what a lot of the talk around the building is there. The other thing, to go back to the chemistry piece that you talked about, that's really intangible. It's hard to quantify it. So people shy away from talking about it. Plus, people aren't in the building, so they don't know.
Right.
One of the blessings I have is I'm in those buildings a lot, and I'm around during off-season workouts. And I don't know how to explain this. If you've played the sport and been around it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a feel when you've got a team that's together, that you got like a unit instead of just a bunch of individuals. And I feel it the most observing or like mixing in with those teams when they're in off-season workouts. And I'm not saying it guarantees that you're going to win X number of games or anything like that, but you can tell, because I've been around some of the best ones, and the workouts, not just how hard they are, but like the vibe that emanates off the workout and the guys collectively versus the vibe of a place where guys are just there because that's where they got a scholarship and just checking a box. Florida, man, they feel so much like that first instead of the second.
Right.
They feel so much like a group of guys who have been through some really tough stuff over here in this ditch, and they've just basically committed to each other. We're getting out of that this year. And we've learned. So we were all here last year. We all tasted that. And anyone who's new, just an FYI, like we are quickly indoctrinating you into the idea that we're not going through that again. That's the kind of team, since they finished hot last year, that's one of those few teams that was not excited to see the season end. That's a team that I wish we could take the first 6 games, put them on the back end of the season and play all the way into February, because we feel like we could win every game if we did it. They got started too late last year. And so everything around there is geared to making sure play at that level again, but play out of the gate at that level.
Right. Yeah, this spring, I wanted to see more DJ Lagway working on them intermediate throws. He's going to be special, especially if that hamstring is 100%. We can get into some RPO. I think we're going to have a special season. I love my wide receiver room. I love my running back room.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be explosive. I think we're going to play complementary football. I expect the defense to be able to stop the run, secondary. We got some spots there where we can get young, quick at safety, but I do like the talent with Lagonza and my man Stubbs. True freshmen, but both are very talented guys. But back to Lagway, him not throwing, there was some questions about maybe his shoulder. You was around the team. I know we was talking a little bit behind the scenes, but what are you hearing with DJ Lagway in the shoulder?
I just asked Billy point blank. I asked him off the record, and he said he'll be good to go. We're throwing him 3 days a week right now. He'll be fine. He was fine in the latter portion of spring. If we really wanted to push him, we could have pushed him latter portion of spring. So, then naturally you say, you willing to say that on camera? He said, yeah, that's fine. Okay. Ask me. So I asked him on camera. He said the same thing. So, I would say the anxiety level or the nervousness level is way down compared to, you know what it felt like early in spring when the headline is, he's not throwing. So I didn't really know what was up with that. So I made sure to ask, and he said, yeah, we'll be fine there. We'll be good.
What you got us at win total-wise?
I think that 8.5 is fair, the over-under in the market. And a lot of that's tied to schedule. Mm-hmm. So, but, man, I still think they're going to go over. Yeah. If I had to gut it right now, the thing about schedule is it's very popular to talk about that for obvious reasons. It's college, man. In college, you are largely a product of what your schedule says that you're going to be. But you don't play your schedule on a Saturday.
Right.
Like I always revert back to this when I'm trying to predict a team's record. If I try and do that, you play a team on a Saturday, and so I look at the fact that you play A, B, C, D, and E, and in totality, man, that's a beast of a schedule. I think the same thing about Oklahoma. But if those teams are what I think they are, that means the opposition has to play you as well. Like that means you're part of what makes their schedule tougher. And I often don't think that part of the equation gets factored in. And I also don't think that, Texas is the preseason favorite to win this conference. They got to come to you.
Right.
Like they've got to come in there. And the line on that game, if Vegas had to release it today, it's a single digit. It's under a touchdown. And if Texas is favored over you, it's slightly in your building. Think about what you would say right now if I told you nothing more than I've already seen the season play out. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but I'm telling you, you're going to beat Texas at home. How would you think the rest of the season's going to go?
We might throw confetti after the Texas game. I think that DJ Lagway, Art Manning matchup in Gainesville is going to be
huge.
It's going to be huge.
I think if we had a big screen right here and we put up that entire helmet grid schedule, that Texas at Florida, that's a non-traditional game. It's not a rivalry game. Like that game, if you're circling biggest conference games, any conference in the country this year, I don't think people know off the top of their head that game's going to happen. They know Texas has got to go to Georgia, Bama's got to go to Georgia. They know those.
Right.
But do you know Texas is going to Florida? And then the follow-up is, do you think it's a big deal? A lot of people wouldn't think it's a big deal because a lot of people don't expect a lot from Florida.
Right.
But if you think high of Florida, then you look at that and say, wow, that's low-key one of the biggest games in the conference this year.
Yeah, we got to bring our stick. I like Texas. I like Sarkisian. That offense.
That's a machine.
It's a machine.
Yeah.
It's gonna be quite the game. Let's move over to some Miami football. Mario Cristobal, I think, is a good fit down to Miami. Just to keep it unbiased, I think he's a great fit. One of their guys. He can recruit. I want to see where Miami's next step is. Cam Ward came in, and in my opinion, rescued them.
Yep.
Without Cam Ward, that's a totally different team. I think Florida State and Miami season came down to who got Cam Ward a little bit. But this year, Beck seemingly is saving them as well. Like they're finding guys in the portal to kind of save that quarterback situation. But outside of that, I think Mario's a great fit, but I don't know how they continue the progress. 5-game, 7-game, 10-game wins. Like, how do they make that next step?
Yeah, because if I was a Miami hater, I could easily say you went from 5 wins to 7 wins. You went and rented a player that got you to 10 wins. Your defense was atrocious last year. That quarterback was lipstick on otherwise a total like pig of a season. So he's gone now, and the guy you got out of the portal just started throwing again from surgery. What if you just fall back to earth? I could look at it pessimistically like that.
Right.
I don't think that's unfair, by the way, because I do still think they got a lot to prove. It's very unique that they won 10 games down there. I think we had the stat on the show one night where they've only done that like once or twice since the run of the 90s, early 2000s ended. So it's not nothing that they won 10 games, but I feel about them the same way I felt about that LSU team with Jaden Daniels, where you got a Heisman Trophy. For Cam Ward, it was caliber. For Jaden, they just flat out won the thing, and you didn't even go to your conference title game. It's because you wasted him because of the defense and the issues you had there. So it's really weird, but it's never a blessing that your quarterback's hurt. But I think it's very interesting that Beck comes in there off an injury, because when Cam Ward came in there, I was down there for some of those early workouts when he first walked in the building. And it was so obvious from day one, it was just his team. Everyone was going to jump on his back. Carson Beck, you're hoping he can do that, but I don't think people are banking on that like they were when Cam Ward walked in. And it may be a blessing in disguise, because what it does is it convinces your entire organization you can't just ride a guy like you did last year. Went and hired a new DC. So obviously that result is not anywhere close to the standard regardless of who our quarterback is. But we may need to win a game 19-16 this year. Can we do that? Or we may need to run the ball 229 yards and 4 touchdowns from that tailback room. Can we do that this year? If I'm Mario Cristobal, the one thing, if I didn't deliver anything else to you, that I was going to deliver from the day I walked in there was I'm going to recruit an offensive line. I'm going to develop an offensive line. We'll be dominant. All right, so I'm multiple years in now. Can I take over a game with that unit this year? They got multiple potential first-round guys on that unit. And so, like, I look at Miami from that standpoint. I totally agree with you. It's really a prove-it year for them. And you may say, well, that's not fair. Well, it absolutely is fair. It wouldn't be fair if we were saying it in year 1 or 2.
Right.
But he's been down there multiple years now, and no one's talking hot seat. It's not like that.
No.
There's competitive pressure and there's job security pressure in this sport. Mario has none of the latter. I think that entire organization has a lot of the former, just the competitive pressure of, all right, if Miami's back, prove they're back. And prove it without Cam Ward. Show me that it's more than just sort of a rental one-year wonder sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's one of my red flags with Mario. Like, you're in year 4 and you're bringing in 20 players through the transfer portal, and a lot of those guys you're counting on to contribute because you don't have the depth, which is cool, right? Because some teams are surviving on that, and it could just be a one-year thing. But what's your overall take on? And we'll get back to some Mario stuff, but what's your overall take on transfer portal, talent acquisition? How many guys through the portal, high school rank? Like, how do you see that thing kind of flowing for you?
If I was running one of the top 10 programs in the country, I'd probably want it to be 85-15, maybe even 90-10, high school versus portal. But look, I've talked to their staff about this. They look at it and they say, you have got to acquire talent under the structure you exist in. So it's just a different philosophy. It's not that they're certainly not opposed to high school recruiting. They believe in it just as much as anyone else, but they would look at it and they would say, if this mechanism's there, and if we are not rolling the dice on guys, like we have an opportunity to go get proven guys, and we're able to do it financially because the structure that we live in makes that possible and makes it legal, like we're going to go do it.
Right.
And I remember the one thing that I've had hammered home to me from Miami is, some people use the portal and use recruiting, and they look at a depth chart, and okay, we've got a question at left guard. Let's go get a kid out of the portal, and all right, that's our left guard. They look at it and they say, no, let's go get 2 or 3 of them, and most of them won't work out. I mean, it may be a 50-50 deal, but that's okay because we loaded up so much. We found the one that works and maybe 1 or 2 that don't. Okay, shake your hand, we'll see you later. It's just you keep on stacking and stacking and stacking and stacking. The only difference is a generation ago that would have been strictly through high school. Same strategy that any mega power program would call themselves having. They just view it as being every bit as doable through the portal as through high school. Now, I listen to that and I say, I think I'd prefer to do it through high school. Yeah. I think most people would prefer to do it that way. The one thing I always come back to is I've got my personal preference, okay? So then I set it over here, and the one thing I got to acknowledge is I've never run a program before. Yeah. So I've never really had to put that in practice, and I've never seen what I would do if plan A didn't work out. Would I go this way all of a sudden? Would I swerve? Would philosophically things change for me? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. I think like Miami got some talent. It's just young.
Yeah.
And in this microwave society where you gotta win, the pressure to win every year is there.
Front-loaded schedule too.
Right. So you gotta get guys. It's hard to depend on some of the young boys. But I like JoJo Trader. He showed a lot in that. He didn't play a lot throughout the entire fall, but in that bowl game, you started to see some of that high school ranking and height. This kid could play. Malachi, the young freshman that they brought in, I think he's a ball player. But they went into the portal and got some guys that may take reps away from guys with a higher ceiling. And that's my only thing with what I don't like about the way Mario talent acquisition is. I think sometimes he's stunting the growth of his younger guys by bringing in 5th-year seniors, 6th-year seniors, and that takes away reps. But your ceiling is higher with the younger guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think the team is talented. Beck being healthy is going to be the entire season, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If he's down, I mean, that's the same thing with Florida. If Lagway's down, then it probably gets ugly at Florida as well. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all flows out. How do you think the Notre Dame-Miami game out the gate, how do you think that works out?
It's a culture test. Really, both of them. I mean, as much as we're sitting here talking about Miami, you got to understand now Notre Dame's a place where they just had a general manager leave them for their rival, USC. And there's a lot of talk around there right now of sort of, is last year just Notre Dame? Like, is that what Notre Dame's going to be? Did Marcus just build to 2024, there's the standard, now we're going to cruise at that level every year? Because as much as we're talking about Miami, you know, the Cam Ward year, and y'all go win 10 games, is that going to be sustained? It's fair to say that about Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I mean, up until 5 minutes ago, and they go to the national title, we would have been sitting here talking about how embarrassing it is they lost to Northern Illinois and got their season derailed. But you forget that, just like you forget the Ohio State loss to Michigan because they made up for it in the playoff. Well, that's last year, so you got rewarded for it. You both went to a national title game. Well, with Miami, they believe, hey, we lost a quarterback, but you know what? The guy that we're going to play this year, while he's green, may have higher upside than Riley Leonard ever had. And I agree with that. That's why I'm saying that. But you got to prove it. And also, you got to prove that it's more a culture thing. It's more what you saw last year wasn't just a team. That's our program. So that's the level that you can expect us to compete at every year. Well, the beautiful thing about this sport is the games eventually arrive.
Right.
And so you get that tested. Like Florida, we were talking a few minutes ago. They thought they had that figured out, and Miami just clown stomps them in their own building in week 1 last year. So what if Notre Dame comes in there and does that to Miami? But on the flip side of that, what if the last thing we saw is Notre Dame playing for a national title, and then the next thing we see is Miami does to them what they did to Florida? You're talking about they're just such deviating paths that these seasons go on because we don't play 162 games like baseball. We play 12 of them. So the outcome of any one game radically changes, sometimes for years, what you're saying about a guy or a player, coach, whatever.
Who you got winning the ACC? You know, you got to be Miami and Clemson for the favorites there, right?
Yeah, the one team that I am keeping an eye on is Georgia Tech.
Okay.
Because I feel like they had that 8 overtime
Hayes,
game.
Luther King.
Yeah.
I like Georgia Tech.
If I didn't change anything about the team, so keep the team as it is right now. Mm-hmm. If I were to go back in time and I were to change that 8 overtime game against Georgia and they win it,
right,
I think people will be talking about them a lot more right now.
Yeah.
And in reality, they're the same team, scenario A versus scenario B, but I think they're still a little under the radar. Haynes King is there. I love that. It's a year where there's not a lot of returning proven production at quarterback in any league.
Right.
So you got Klubnik over there at Clemson. That's why they're the favorite. They should be. I agree with that. But outside of that, there's not a lot of it in the ACC. That's why I think Miller Moss may do some special things at Louisville. But I think King and Georgia Tech, they got a couple of dates. If you just circle them, Clemson's got to go in there. They got to go in there pretty early.
Yeah.
Georgia's got to go in there. I think they play them at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But still, they get both of those biggest games of theirs at home. They'll probably be favored in every other game they play. And if you think about where that thing was when Brent Key took over and where it is now, look at the competitive character. Just, there's no doubt when you watch that team play, there's no doubt, that's a Brent Key team.
Yeah.
That's the biggest compliment I could give you.
No, they impressed me game 1 last year when they smoked Florida State. You know, they kind of put the ACC on notice. And in that Georgia game, like, the refs helped Georgia out a lot. The refs be helping Georgia. But I thought Georgia Tech should have won that game. They didn't. I think also, too, just speaking, like when Dabo first, speaking a little bit of Clemson, I like Clemson this year. I wasn't a big fan of Klubnik until the end of the season. And he started clicking. I started watching more games. I was like, this kid can play. But I also like Dabo's approach to the portal. I know a lot of teams were aggressive with trying to get his guys.
Yeah.
But I think his approach of not being heavy in it himself and aggressive with trying to bring guys in, help him keep guys. What do you think about Dabo and, you know, he's the last of the dinosaurs?
He is. It's another classic example of the competitive pressure spot. Dabo Swinney will never be on any hot seat. His legacy's already been made. If he doesn't win another game, his legacy's been made.
Right.
However, every year these last few years has been a test of his philosophy because he does it his way. I've been so conflicted on it because there's stuff I wish he would change a little bit, But I also appreciate a guy who's defined his principles and values, and he's just going to stick to them.
You got to respect it,
I
man.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Even if I disagree with some of it, I respect it. But this is what they've been building towards. So they took a couple of years, a little bit of a down cycle. Not terrible. They were never terrible.
Right.
But they went from producing blockbusters to just producing B-plus level movies for a little while. Okay. Well, they've got their multi-year starter at quarterback now. They've got a multi-year offensive coordinator. They went and got Tom Allen as defensive coordinator. They got NFL talent on all three levels of their defense. They should be not just an ACC contender. If I say all that out loud, and the best wide receiver room they've had in a long time now,
right.
They should be a national title contender. It shouldn't be me and you watching them and saying, dang, Clemson looks good. Now the most they're going to be able to do is win the ACC, kind of like you talked about Arizona State in the Big 12 last year. It's, well, dang, they won the Big 12. Good for them. Now, they can't win a national title, but good for them for winning their conference.
Right.
We shouldn't be talking about Clemson like that this year. That should be a bona fide national title contender. If it's not the end of the world. It just means that we got to kind of redefine what the ceiling of Clemson football is under the current way they do things. That's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
You're not still chasing your national title. You've already got 2 of them, 3 of them, however many he won, and beat Saban to do it. So you've proven yourself 10 times over. It's just I think there's something deeply personal, although Dabo may or may not admit it, about how he feels versus how this sport is right now. And he's got a fire inside of him, I think, to prove, even if it's just one last time, my way still works. Like, my way transcends whatever the current generation of NIL we're in is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I was definitely heavy critical of his philosophy in it, but, you know, the last year he won the ACC, and it's like, I don't know, maybe he's owning something, but I still think you got to have a healthy balance. Let's talk some Florida State. Mike Norvell, they went from 13-0, trying to get in the playoffs, got snubbed, depending on who you're talking to, and then they fell off a cliff, you know, the following year. I think Mike Norvell has a issue that the other 2 programs don't have, and that's talent acquisition. I think Billy Napier does a good job of evaluating and developing, recruiting. I think Mario does a good job in that arena as well. Mike Norvell, not so much. He's got a brand new team. Do you think he can dig his way out of this?
What you just said is obviously true. When I was there, I have no doubt they acknowledge that that's a reality. There's a difference, in other words, if you're morbidly obese, between saying, I got to lose weight versus doing what it takes to lose the weight. Similarly, if you're getting out-recruited, it's obvious. Unless you're a total idiot, it's obvious you're getting out-recruited, and it's obvious you've got to adjust something in the talent acquisition department. So it's easy to say, man, we got to fix this.
Right.
And maybe you even take steps, but there's this, and I may be wrong about this, but I still feel like there's a sense of they're kind of trying to feel their way as to what the answers are, and whether it's hiring new people or employing a new philosophy on talent acquisition. I just think they got themselves so out of whack with what they did in the portal 2 cycles ago, and I think they fooled themselves into becoming convinced that's just what we're going to be able to do every year, and it's not. They were the victim. They were sort of the test case, the guinea pig, if you will, of the portal era of realizing there's a reason they call roulette.
Right.
And it can really make you look like a genius, or it can make you rich, but it can also make you look like a disaster and break you. And the thing about it is, you're just doing the same thing. So you go to the portal one year, and you go win the ACC. You go to the portal the next year. You crash as fantastically as I ever remember any team crashing. There were minus 11 wins one year to the next.
That's crazy.
It's the first time it's happened since Ellis Johnson took over Southern Miss. And they had to go winless. They had to go 0-12 to go minus 11. So Mike's a good dude, man. Very competitive, hard worker, fully committed to getting it right. I wonder, granted, as an outsider, I just wonder it'd be one thing if you lost last year with a lot of young homegrown talent.
Right.
You didn't. And you lost with a lot of guys who weren't even yours to begin with. A large portion of them weren't yours to begin with. And so not only do you have to hit the reset button, but there's not like this massive pipeline of guys in your program that you're looking at and saying, you know what, we took our lumps, but once they get to be sophomores and juniors. So, like, what is the foundation of your program? Right. What is it? I ask that, like, open-ended, because I keep looking for an answer to that. And as long as I'm not getting an answer, my answer to your question is I don't know if they can get it turned around.
Yeah. I think that big year, increased Mike Norvell's buyout, so that put Florida State in a different type of situation. If that buyout wasn't as big, he probably don't make it through a 2-win season. So financially, they're in a position. Quarterback-wise, I think Thomas Castellanos, I'm not high on him, but I do think he's going to bring some improvising to Mike Norvell's offense, and it needs some of that. When things break down, Gus is calling the offense now, but I think what made them take off was Jordan Travis improvising and doing a lot of things out of the pocket. And in that offense, I think Thomas could bring some of that. I don't know how successful they're going to be. It ain't hard to improve from 2 wins. So I think they improve. It's just how much do they improve, and they still going to have the same issue, talent acquisition.
Well, so what you just said, I don't want to gloss over this. Normally, if you triple your win total from the previous season, that's incredible. You got to triple your win total to go to a bowl game. So what's acceptable? Aside the quarterback situation, I agree with you. Stylistically, he looks like he should fit well into a Malzahn offense or a Mike Norvell offense. I agree with that. But, like, at their best, what are they this year? And not only that, what's acceptable? Like, what does he need to do this year for not even like the myopic 1% fringe fans to be happy? I'm talking about the core of your audience, the core of your fan base. Is it 8 wins? Is it 6 wins? Do you just need to look promising again? Because here's what I have noticed about this business. When you get paid the amount that those guys get paid, they don't pay you that to find yourself and to figure things out in year 4, 5, 6, 7. That's year 1 stuff. You don't get to get paid the amount he gets paid and say, all right, we're going to hit the reset button and we're going to work on some stuff. Riley's dealing with this at USC.
Yeah.
It's like, you feel free to do that, but you go do that stuff at a G5 program. Or at FSU, they would say, that was what Memphis was for. You don't come here and then take time on our dime to figure it out because we hired you to be a proven winner. And then we thought we had hit the lottery, and that's why we gave you the pay bump that we gave you. And, it's not like Mike Norvell didn't try hard. It's not like he's not committed to it. So there's a little maybe bearing of the responsibility on both ends. But I just keep coming back to this, and I ask this because I got some Florida State fans who are buddies of mine and haven't given me a straight answer. And so I keep asking them, what's acceptable this year? What's a success this year? Because it's totally fair. If you have established that you can win the ACC, nothing less than competing for the conference crown is acceptable. Just because you won 2 games last year doesn't mean if I'm a fan, I'm going to lower the bar of what's acceptable here and say, oh, all right, well, in a former life, I would have wanted you to compete for the league title. But since you won 2 games last year, I'm going to be happy with 6 or 7. I wouldn't feel that way, so I can't blame them if they don't feel that way.
Yeah. Did I get your ACC? Who you think win the ACC?
I would go Clemson right now.
Clemson? Okay. Does Florida State have any shot versus Bama out the gate game 1?
Man, it would have a lot to do with Bama. If Bama's not – if Bama came out of the gate like Florida did last year. What I'm trying to say is if Alabama plays a B-level version of themselves, no. I don't think Florida State's going to beat them. However, it's college football in week 1.
Right.
So I just have such a hard time speaking in absolutes about college football in week 1. That's one I'll be interested in, though, because there's a world where Bama goes in there and wins like 27-16.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I come away saying, I feel better about both of them. I especially feel better about Florida State. I just don't want to see you get blown out. You know as well as I do what the vibe is around there. If if a team comes in there week one and they do to you what Miami did to Florida week one last year.
It's deflating, man.
Well, also, remember last year when it went off the rails for Florida State, it wasn't just, it wasn't like USC last year. USC kept losing close games, the one-possession game.
Yeah. Florida
State was like, you had the paddles on the chest every week, and it was just clear, boom, and it's every week. It was a dead team. Yeah. And if you lose a couple early on, that's the question that comes right back to being asked. Is it a dead team? Because you can't have that 2 seasons in a row.
Okay, man, I don't want to hold you too long. We're going to wrap it up. Let me ask you this last question, and I appreciate your time, man. Is Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal long-term solutions for both of those programs?
Yeah, I felt that about Billy last year. I went there this time last year. Now, granted, this is before the start they had, but I remember saying on the show, I think people will be shocked if they were able to go in the building, meet with the staff, sit in on meetings and whatnot. You would just be surprised at how similar that place feels to the top 5 programs in the country, because they've been losing. And normally when you're around a program that had been losing, you can tell, because internally it doesn't feel like Georgia. It doesn't feel like Ohio State. Florida felt like Georgia and Ohio State. It's the craziest thing. And what that is, or at least what you think it is it's a place that has its act together. The results just hadn't proven that yet. But the results will come. All right, then the season starts like it did last year, and I'm like, did I just get that wrong? And there's still a part of me that wonders, do they have it fully figured out? But I fully believe in Billy Napier. He's just a little more cerebral. He's not as in your face.
Yeah.
He doesn't go out of his way to convince you that his way will work, but I really do. They got good people in the building.
For sure.
And they spare no expense on it. Mario, I also think that. And I also think that those are 2 different guys. They go about their business 2 different ways. But you got to remember now, at Florida, we've seen them win 2 national championships this millennium. At Miami, you had a prolonged desert of results. And so I know everyone wants to compete for a national championship. But for just a second, you got to be realistic, and you got to look at it and say, what if they win 9 games this year? You go 9-3. And then they win 9 next year and the year after that. You probably didn't win a national title any of those years. You've still got a guy operating your program infinitely better than it had in those players' lifetimes. If you're 20 years old or younger, like, you haven't even known a Miami being a 9-win or better per year caliber team.
Right.
Having said that, I do think if they make it all click one year, they could compete for a national title, because that's one of the few places that's not in the dance perennially, that has the kind of talent walking around the building that any given year, if it clicks into place, if they were half decent defensively last year, they would have been right in there.
Man, I was so glad that defense was bad. It saved me. It saved me because Cam Ward was on absolute fire. I appreciate the conversation. A lot of Florida Big 3 football talk with the legend himself, Josh Pate. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me, man.
Thanks a lot.